I'd like to begin by acknowledging the First Nations people, the traditional custodians of the land on which we're gathered. To acknowledge our gratitude that we share this land today, our sorrow for the costs of that sharing, and our hope that we can move to a place of justice and partnership together. And as our custom with these webinars, I'd like to begin with the YCW prayer. Let us pray. Lord Jesus, I thank you for this day. I offer you all my work, my hopes and struggles, my sorrows and joys. Help me and all my fellow workers to think like you, to work with you, to live in you. Help me to love you with all my heart and serve you with all my strength. May your kingdom come in all our places of work, study and leisure, and in all our homes. Give me the courage to challenge what is wrong and keep me faithful to the ideals of the young Christian workers. May those who have suffered for what is right and all who have died share the happiness of your kingdom forever. Mary, Queen of Apostles, pray for us. Saint Therese of Lisieux, pray for us. Saint Joseph the Worker, pray for us. Saint Mary of the Cross, pray for us. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thanks very much, Pat. And I'd just like to say welcome to everyone to this webinar tonight on a very challenging apostolic exhortation from Pope Francis. I think exhortation may well be the right term for it. And as we'll hear from our panel of speakers tonight, there are many challenges for us and for the world in the field of ecology and building and rebuilding our common home. But first thing I'm going to simply start with by introducing our first panelist tonight, and she'll be well known to some of you, or perhaps many of you, Jacqui Remond, who is actually now a lecturer in the Theology and Philosophy Department at Australian Catholic University. She's also working on a PhD in integral ecology at Notre Dame University, I should say, in Australia. And she also consults with the Dicastery for Integral Human Development in their section on ecology. So thanks very much for joining us tonight, Jacqui, and I'll hand over to you.
Thanks so much, Stefan. Thanks to the Young Catholic Workers as well, and to the Australian Cardine Institute for the invitation to be with you for this gathering. I'd also like to first acknowledge country, so I might just put my slides on. I'll come back to that one perhaps, because today I'm speaking, and it's important, it's right and just for me to say that I'm speaking from Guyamagal country, where I sit at home here in Manly this evening. I want to acknowledge the traditional owners and the custodians of this land that was never ceded. And I acknowledge the knowledge, the cultural wisdom, spirituality, and regenerative practices of the Guyamagal people of this land. And I offer this presentation as a way to respectfully honour beauty in this place within creation. So perhaps if I go back to the first slide, I've titled this one, Journeying in Communion and Commitment. I don't know if anybody who's read the encyclical saw those 5 words as a subtitle in this exhortation. But I think they're really key because it holds the framework of the journey that we're on, our spiritual voyage in bodies on this earth, connecting with the crises of our times and understanding that this exhortation follows 8 years after the amazing encyclical Laudate. So the call of synodality, which is echoing through our church at this time in the world, means that we're journeying together. And we're called to be in communion with all creation, within creation. And that, of course, includes brothers and sisters who are human, and our commitment to actually look after this incredible gift that is creation, that we are as well. So I've included Laudate Si with this, and I think it's because it's that continuation that's important. And I want to acknowledge also that the address or the exhortation is again for all people of goodwill, for everyone, just like Laudate Si indeed is for everyone. And I'll acknowledge, as Stefan did, the great work of the Vatican Dicastery to restructure themselves in this period since the COVID Commission so that they're listening to the realities on the ground. They've got 3 key pillars now, and they're not doing a top-down approach like it has been. This call of institutional reform that's at the heart of the exhortation is being modelled by this dicastery. So they have 3 key areas of work. They listen to what's happening everywhere around the globe where they're invited to hear. And they have a dialogue and research pillar and communication. And I want to acknowledge the Laudate Si movement, which I feel like a proud woman to have been part of the very beginning of this movement that serves the church and Catholic organisations, inspiring us all and mobilising our communities to care for our common home and achieve climate and ecological justice. And I'll share some of the resources that we've developed in since the last Wednesday, since the 4th of October, when Laudate Deum was released. Of course, I need to acknowledge the name. It's important when we think about Laudate Si, praise be, the words from St. Francis of Assisi 800 years ago with his Canticle of Creatures, the Canticle of the Sun, as it's sometimes called. And it was exactly 800 years ago in 1224. Next year, we'll be celebrating 800 years of that Canticle of the Creatures. And this language, Laudate Deum, meaning praise God. So here we move from praise be for all creation, praise be for everything in our lives, to praise God in this triune sense of each other with our Creator God, creatures and creation, and everyone. So the full text, of course, is available at the Holy See website. So I've just included the link there, if that's helpful. And one of the key resources that we've been able to produce in a short space of time are a series of quotes from the exhortation. And these are in video format with images, and they're very brief, 15 to 20 seconds. They're freely available, and you're all welcome to share them and share the message of the exhortation. I'll just share one of them. So it's just queuing up now. So that call is obviously one of the key ones around how we bring about this change in response to the crises we face, the ruptures of the ecological crises as a key focus of the exhortation, and the ecological crises in terms of biodiversity loss and water and all those other dimensions that the exhortation doesn't choose to focus on. And that's because the climate crisis is in fact affecting all of the other ecological crises: the human, the social, the cultural, and the environmental. So like I mentioned there, that there are many themes in the exhortation, but they focus on the need for us to respond to the climate crisis today. The science that's in the exhortation is far more detailed than it was in Laudate Si. And that's because of the concerns that I think we all feel when we look at what is happening to our world and the rapidity with which it is all moving forward to create more and more greenhouse gases going into our atmosphere. They have not been capped. They are not being reduced in the way that was intended at the climate meetings, that have not been effective enough. So we hear about that weakness that's happened. So the global leadership is being called out in this exhortation. The call for institutional change is being called out, and for multilateralism to be reformed. So at its heart, it's a global exhortation. It's very prophetic in terms of being clear and in terms of the precise nature that it's calling for the change that is needed for the most vulnerable communities, the poorest people, the nations and creation that are all paying the highest price. Our human social systems are creating the injustices and worsening the inequalities. And as I said, our leaders are being called out in Laudate Deum for the weak leadership shown in response to date. I want to also highlight some themes. So a foundational theme is the interconnectedness that we saw in Laudate Si. And in Laudate Deum, it reminds us that we must see the dignity of the human as incomprehensible, as not being understood, and as not being sustained without other creatures. We only truly get to know who we are as humans on earth when we see ourselves in communion, in the sights and the gaze of other creatures, in the contact with eucalyptus leaves on the trees. In terms of breathing in the air, we understand much more who we are because of the ecosystems that we are within. This is important because our place on earth, and in light of our religious tradition, it means that we are called to live in kinship, in reciprocal relations, where we have a particular responsibility to safeguard one another and creation, being custodians who care for creation so that we all flourish. Another key point in the exhortation is about balance or equilibrium. In a complex world, the exhortation says, where the impact of our decisions can be hard to trace, moral responsibility might take the form of asking hard questions about the extent to which we are maintaining or disrupting the delicate balance of our earth systems. So bringing our social systems into balance with earth's ecosystems is essential, and that we do this urgently now. This means that our response and our responses to date have often been starting in the wrong place. We've been starting with the thoughts about what it means for humanity. We need to start from an ecosystemic perspective. We need to look at the damage that's being done and respond to those root causes. This brings me to my next point, that the reality we face in terms of the crises are the result of two root causes. The exhortation goes to great pains. Pope Francis talks again about the technocratic paradigm, this obsession we have, this way that we've been trained and schooled to think and fragment things, to disconnect and to objectify everything with the intention to increase our human power over all that we're with, to place ourselves at the center of the story. And this, in fact, then nullifies the agency, the values, the purpose of creation. So that's the second root cause, an anthropocentric worldview. Pope Francis doesn't mince his words in this exhortation. He makes it very clear that we need to shift our worldview so that we are at the service of God's creation, which includes ourselves, so that we all flourish. Another key point, which I've mentioned in the introduction, is that we need to rethink and transform the way decisions are made about the global level of this story, the multilateralism theme. We need to change it from an elite with excessive power to a wave, a power from below, a system where change can come from every nation, every country, where human rights and the rights of creation are respected, and the common good is the uplifting objective. So here the themes again come through from Laudate Si, and they come through again in this exhortation. I want to show a few slides now, so I'm just going to cue that up. So just one moment. Is it gone? Sorry, it's just, it must have been when I shared the video, it went somewhere. Here, let's see if this will help. If we can go back. Yes. Sorry. Thanks for bearing with me there. So here's a very simple representation of this call in Laudate Deum, to praise God and recognize ways of thinking, seeing, feeling, acting, and living. So ways of being that are theocentric. This is the call. We might recognize on the left the ecocentric perspective, very familiar, the way that we've been schooled, trained in seminaries, of course, and everywhere, that man is at the top of creation, lording over, being the masters of, is not always said like that, but that's the insinuation. That's the messaging that's come through. And so at this time, we're called to see not necessarily from an eco or biocentric perspective that's without our creator in the field of view, but from a theocentric perspective, where we certainly see the circle of life, like in the eco and the biocentric perspective, but from the perspective of our particular giftedness, to praise and give thanks for it all, and to serve creation with love. From the exhortation, we are part of nature, included in it, and thus in constant interaction with it. We do not look at the world from without, above or beside, I would add, but from within. Some fantastic questions are in the exhortation, so I want to draw your attention to a few of them. The world sings of an infinite love. How can we fail to care for it? How can we turn a blind eye to what is happening? How can we keep persisting with our investments and our institutions and our ways of being that are contributing to the build-up of greenhouse gases, to the warming of Earth's ecosystems, to the damage to our neighbours in the Pacific? How can we fail to care? Laudate Deum and Laudate Si here on the theme of interconnectedness. Laudate Deum reminds us that we must see the dignity of the human, as I mentioned earlier, as incomprehensible and unsustainable without other creatures. In Laudate Si, Pope Francis says all things are interconnected, reminding us that the ecological crisis is a summons to a profound interior conversion, a re-examining of our relationships with our Creator, with creation, and with our sisters and our brothers. There's one reference to a woman in the exhortation. You might remember one of the critiques of Fratelli Tutti was that in the footnotes, there was no reference to any women. And I noted fairly early on when I had Laudate Deum in my hands and ran through the footnotes that there's a reference to Donna Haraway, a fabulous woman who's been doing great work. She's in the US. You might like to look her up. And she refers to the entire world in terms of everything as a contact zone. Pope Francis draws this into the exhortation. So if we think about what that means for us, contact zone, all of the things that we connect with, that we're in contact with, this is calling us to see the culture of encounter in the exhortation, that the entire world is a gift for which we're privileged to be able to connect, whether it be the non-living dimensions of water, even though there's living things in our water, the air we breathe, the soil, each other, the connection and contact points with creatures, like in this beautiful image. Right at the centre of the exhortation, just like in Laudate Si, there's a core question right in the middle of it. As you know, the exhortation's quite short, 7,000 words. It's only got about 75 paragraphs. And right in the middle at paragraph 33 are these core questions for us. What is the meaning of my life? What is the meaning of our time on earth? And what is the ultimate meaning of all my work and effort? So again, this call for us to examine our lives, to examine our consciousness of what we're doing, what we're so busy being about, and to see that it is at the heart of understanding who we are that we need to respond from that deep place of understanding the myths and the metaphors that guide us. I'd like to draw attention, as Stefan said, to some action. I think it's really important that we do go away from a gathering like this with actions, and I want to add some from myself, if that's okay now. I know I've shared a couple of things in terms of the social media messages that you can share, but I'd like to draw your attention to something significant that's happening in the lead up to COP28. And we had a similar thing in COP15, where we had the petition from all the Catholics being added to the voice, calling for a 1.5 degrees Celsius and no more. Well, there's a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. You may have heard of it. We launched it in Oceania and Asia just last month. I was emceeing that in Darwin for the Catholic Church in our region. And it began in May last year, 2022, when the leaders of Vanuatu and Tuvalu made clear the need for a treaty that says that we need to stop extracting and burning fossil fuels. Cardinal Sherie picked it up in July, only a couple of months later, last year. He said a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty gives great hope for integrating and strengthening the Paris Agreement. And of course, that means that this treaty and Laudate Deum are excellent tools to support the negotiations of the UN conference, or the COP gathering, COP28, which will be beginning the end of November and the start of December this year. So we've got a few more months, not too long, to add our voices to the treaty. As individuals, you can go to this web link and you can endorse it as a person, but also as organisations. And we already have Cardinal Maffei of Tonga, who has endorsed it on behalf of his diocese. Of course, Archbishop Peter Lloyd Chong, who's endorsed it as the Archbishop of Suva on behalf of Fiji for his archdiocese. And we have similar leaders in Asia who've been doing the same. So I encourage you to get behind this very practical action so that we can urgently support the treaty that can explicitly focus on ending the extraction and the use of fossil fuels. Now, we know in this we need to cooperate and bring about the transition pathways. So I also want to highlight the fantastic, groundbreaking implementation initiative that Laudate Si and Laudate Deum lead to, which is an action platform that the Vatican Dicastery with Pope Francis announced very recently. So in 2020, we had the Laudate Si year. In 2021, the Laudate Si 7 goals were announced. And in 2022, the Laudate Si action platform began. And it's an invitation from Pope Francis to everybody, saying that we need to respond to the cry of the earth and the poor with a new ecological approach. And we each need to prepare the future, not later, but right now. So there's hope, so that we can cooperate. So it was launched deliberately to call for a people's movement from the ground up. And it's about a social transformation. It's been designed so that communities, individuals, and everybody can make this movement real. And already we have thousands who have enrolled. It really is an action-oriented 7-year ecological conversion journey that you're being invited on in the spirit of integral ecology. And it's unique. It's about the fruits and the unique contribution that we all bring to this. There are 7 goals. Here's the 7 goals. And it's about responding to these as we see fit over the 7 years. And of course, the climate crisis is bound up in responding through each and every one of these goals. The goals are here again with a little bit more of a description. I know this is being recorded so people can come back and pause and pore over it. I'm aware of the time I'm taking, so I'm just going to flick forward. This is the invitation for families and individuals can participate, parishes and dioceses, of course, schools and universities in the educational institutions, health, hospitals, healthcare. The economy sector includes businesses, cooperatives, farms, and organisations and groups are not-for-profits, Catholic Mission, Caritas Australia, all sorts are involved. The Laudate movement fits in there with agencies, and of course religious orders and the great leadership we've seen from religious women and so many others. The platform includes resources, many resources in terms of reflections that have been shared because everyone's invited to contribute that, but also resources in terms of audits, in terms of your climate footprint and reducing that. Community building and, of course, examples of plans, which are all very exciting to have a look at. Stefan, I might pause there because I know there's other wonderful people who are going to share as part of this. But I hope that's been somewhat helpful to frame the conversation. Take it away, Stefan.
Thanks very much, Jacqui. Yeah, that was a wonderful introduction to the challenges of the exhortation, placing us in direct contact with it, and also the questions that it raises, which I think are particularly important, and leaving us also with a range of possible actions to take as well. So with that, yes, I will move directly to Tony Smith. Tony has been an academic for a long time in Tasmania. He's originally from South Africa, where he began his social involvement, I believe, with the Young Christian Workers movement. Also worked with the South African Catholic Bishops' Conference for a while, and now is working voluntarily, I believe, with the parishes of Northern Tasmania on the implementation of Laudate Si. So over to you, Tony.
My background in this area actually goes back about 7 years, 8 years. A good friend of mine who I taught back in South Africa at Marist Brothers in Port Elizabeth many years ago.
Sorry, can I just interrupt, Tony? I'm not sure if that's what you want to share. I can just sort of see your computers. Tony, do you know what we can suggest to Tony Robinson? Can you suggest the technical correction here?
Yeah, Tony, you're sharing your main screen rather than the information from your computer. So have you clicked on the slideshow you want to share? At the moment, you're sharing your main screen.
No, I'm just having a chat to begin, and then I'll share the other screen.
Okay.
So if you can see me, and you can see sustainability, and you can see inaction, then that's what I want you to see.
Okay. All right then. Sorry to
So
interrupt.
my background goes right back before I became involved in Laudate Si, and it actually goes back to this particular space. I was invited to look into the whole question of how engineering is actually meeting the goals of the United Nations. I'm sure most of you would be aware that there are 17 goals. And so what we've been doing over this period of time is actually researching how engineering has been working towards meeting those 17 goals. and we have created a number of sites. This one's on Facebook. You can just look for Serena, and you'll see there's a whole lot of initiatives in there. And this has mainly been done to create a sense of hope. We need to understand that at the basis of who we are as Christians, it's faith, hope, and love. And there is hope within what is actually happening. And I know governments have not been all that wonderful in this particular area, and other bigger organizations, but certainly at a grassroots level, there's some amazing hope that is coming into being through what people are doing around the world in regards to ecology, in regards to sustainability. And coming out of that, through my relationship with our parish priest, last year, I was actually invited to become involved with Laudate Sea. So here in Tasmania, where I live, I've taken on the role of facilitating Laudate Sea across the northern part of the diocese. Now, in this particular space, it's important to realize that we can have a wonderful understanding of what's going on out there. And there's a lot of good work that's happening in universities. There's a lot of good work that's coming out of Rome. But in the end, the most important thing is how are the parishes, how are the parish priests, how are the schools responding to this? This to me is one of the most important things, because we can create a bubble, but if we are not understanding the bubble at a grassroots level, we've got some issues. And so my approach has been very much to utilize the whole question of see, judge, and act, because I believe this is one of the most useful means of us bringing this reality to people's lives. Now, I belong, while I've got this particular role, my local parish that I belong to, which is Launceston, I belong to the Justice and Peace group, and I've actually found one of the best ways of bringing Laudate Sea into a parish is via the Justice and Peace groups. And in Launceston, what we've actually been doing is making people aware. So we've been utilizing over the last year the whole question of the importance of seeing. And in seeing what is actually happening around the world, I have, over this last year, been sending out emails with links to what's going on in Laudate Sea around the world, to actually let people have an element of judgment, where they can actually see what is actually going on, and then judging it in the light of what the Pope is actually saying to us, and breaking that open slowly. Now, one of the issues that I've actually found is that this is not easy. People are not connecting completely in this particular case. I think we've become a little bit more aware over the last few months in terms of what's been going on in Europe. And so the C thing, what I do is I create a C thing in terms of what is actually happening. And then judging it in terms of what's coming out of the Laudate C, out of Rome. There's some really awesome stuff. I agree with you, Jacqui. That resources that are available. So I create a bi-monthly email that I send out to all the parishes and all the parish priests around the whole question of seeing what is happening in the world, judging in this, particularly in the light of the Laudate C, and then calling for action. And one of the actions that I call for is the fact that, has your parish got a justice and peace group? Because this is one of the best ways of actually introducing that I've actually found. So that has been the process that I've found that has worked relatively well. I don't get responses from all the parishes or from all the parish priests. I do get a very good response here in Launceston. They are very active. In the last month, we actually handed out at all the masses, we handed out and chatted over, let me find it. Can you see that? So we've taken the 7 goals and we've put it into a single document. And then what we do is we challenge at the Justice and Peace Group, we challenge each month one of those issues. And then we look into what we can actually do as a Justice and Peace Group, but also informing the parish through handouts around this. So it's very practical, down to earth stuff that we are trying, but it is not an easy task whatsoever. There is not a lot of acknowledgement of the need for this to actually happening. That's why Laudate Deum is so important, because it's talking about what could happen and what we should be doing to not allow climate change to destroy our lives. And this includes the whole question of what's happening with oil, what's happening with carbon, what's happening with the way we actually go about the extreme forms of capitalism of making money. And that is the sad thing as far as I'm concerned. So that's a bit of my story of how I approach. I visit parishes if they invite me. I don't believe in just turning up. I ask for invitations, and I have had some, which is really good. But it's a slow journey at the grassroots. So that's a bit of what I've actually been doing, and also the satisfaction that I've been getting out of the International Association of Ongoing Engineering Education. The hope that the work that's been done there is amazing, and also in terms of the Justice and Peace Group at Church of the Apostles, how they encourage and get involved in bringing about action in terms of caring for the earth. So that's my story.
Thanks very much, Tony. Yes, well, we started with Jacqui giving us the broad picture, and we've seen how we can do some of this work on a parish level or even across a regional level of northern Tasmania. And now for a third view, we're going to move to Sherie Chant, who's a teacher at Colby Catholic College here in Rockingham, Western Australia. And Sherie is going to speak to us a bit from that perspective as an educator of what Laudate Deum is saying to us and how it can be used in schools. Over to you, Sherie.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to come and speak today. So I work in a secondary school, a Catholic secondary school, teaching year 7 to year 12 students. And this is, I'm finding that this is certainly an area that really engages many of our students. There's certainly something that's very tangible, certainly for them. And a lot of the issues that we're talking about, obviously, they learn about across the curriculum in lots of different ways as well. So bringing the season of creation and Laudato Si into the religious education classroom is quite exciting. Finding that students are starting to really sort of connect with what we're teaching there. So there's sort of two ways that we are trying to basically get students to be thinking about creation and certainly that ecological connectedness and the impact of our actions on the world around us, and seeing creation as a gift from God as well. So two sort of ways that we're working is embedding some of the ideas that fit very nicely already into the curriculum. So starting, at a year 8 understanding, where they look at creation as a gift from God, and they look at their role as stewards in the world. And this sort of, all of the things that we're embedding into the curriculum, they kind of either are happening at the same time or lead up to September for the season of creation. And so that there's some knowledge and understanding when we're talking about the season of creation, they have some understanding of that. So back to the year 8 program there, we're getting them to just do something really simple to understand the letter from Pope Francis, look at some of the impacts to the poorer communities around the world, and charities like Caritas, finding out, what are they doing working with people who've been impacted by climate change. And then finding one of those 7 goals. We look at the Laudato Si, the 7 goals, and they find one of the goals that charity is promoting through their work. So it's fairly simple kind of understanding. Then as the students are getting older, so the year 10s, this year we're given a whole day of focus on Laudato Si and climate change, and looking at the 7 goals. So we do some, fun interactive kind of activities, which an online goose chase so we try to make it fun, and they're learning about each of the goals and what they mean and what that means to them. And then they took that understanding and that knowledge from the day, learning about Laudato Si and caring for our common home, and they go out to the primary schools and teach a lesson of RE about caring for their common home to a little group of primary school students. So that's really challenging for the students, really puts them out of their comfort zone, but so much reward from that. They love doing that, and they're really caring about it. year 11, so they're getting a little bit older, a little more understanding, especially in terms of that, what they see, and also the judging aspect. And so we actually engaged with the Australian Catholics magazine this year. They do a Young Voices Award. And so we tied in one of our year 11 tasks so that students could write about an impact of climate change and what the religious response to that is. And they were able to submit their assessments in as projects. So these are all just, the thinking kind of things that we're trying to embed. So all of these sort of flow up to September. And what we did this year was we wanted to really make this a whole school focus. So we are lucky enough to have a Friday prayer where all the school is praying in their pastoral care groups. So we have, a season of creation opening prayer for staff and then also for our PCs. And then we asked for volunteers from each of the RE classes to create a whole school liturgy for the season of creation. And so I had like a lot of positive support, which really encourages us to think kids really care. They're really caring about, the impact on their environment, and they really want to do something about it. And I think somebody else also mentioned about hope, and absolutely that is really where I like to come from with my students, is there is hope. And I don't think they respond if we're coming from that real dire negative kind of space. So so really looking at hope. So our whole school liturgy was really beautiful. The students helped to prepare that. We're lucky, so blessed to have such a beautiful space that we were able to be outside in nature and use some of the resources, the wonderful resources that have already been mentioned, for some of the liturgies that have been provided, as a starting point. Students were able to participate in that as a whole school. And also as part of that, we really tied in the theme, which was let justice and peace flow. So each of the RE classes in September had a reflection activity where they looked at the prayer, using their voice or action, and just something really small in terms of what they were able to do in September. They wrote their little pledge into a raindrop, and then we created a big river across the front of our chapel. So that was a real visual representation of the theme and what the season of creation was all about. And to finish off the season of creation, we focused with those volunteers had about 45, 60 students involved in that. And they created just like a lunchtime stall looking at ecological education, so looking specifically at that goal. And the students created little stalls that they wanted to educate other students about the environment and so forth. So there's just so much that we would love to be able to do. So this is kind of where we're starting from. We've got lots of ideas to create a justice group, and because we don't have one as such at the moment. So, and then maybe connecting with Catholic Earth Care and things like that. And we've just started a little bit of something in the parish that I belong to as well. We just with the mention of parish before, which is beautiful to see as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sherie. Yeah, well, there's a lot of things there happening in that school in particular, by the look of it, and a lot of ideas for others to pick up on. That was kind of from the educator's point of view. Now we're going to move to the student's point of view with Irene Baik, who is a worker with the young Christian students in Parramatta Diocese and also with the YCW Young Christian Workers. Irene, would you like to share what this all means from your point of view?
Yep. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And also I would like to just firstly start this off by acknowledging just the land that I'm on. So acknowledging the Direct people. This is where I'm zooming in from. Yeah, just before I get started with my work with YCS, I would like to just quickly touch base with sort of my realities of where I'm at in all of this. And I'd like to start by saying that I was a YCS leader. And during my time in high school, and during that time as a high schooler, I actually didn't know that much about the environment or like what Laudate meant. And there was a lot of climate change rallies during the time, and that's something that I couldn't really it's not something that in my reality that I could relate to. I grew up in a low socioeconomic background and area, and some of the things that were on my mind were like mental health issues, as well as if I could get, if my family could afford to pay the rent or have food on the table. And that was where I was. And I moved into the YCW space where there was a lot of climate justice actions that were happening. And all this time I was just thinking to myself, oh, I can barely think about getting food on the table, whether or not if I'm going to be mentally okay for the next day. And I realized that during our action planning, as well as just our reviews throughout C, Judge and Act, I was able to learn that the climate really affects everything around us. And I think Pope Francis actually says something about it, about how we'll feel the effects of in the areas of healthcare, source of employment, access to resource, housing, forced migrations, and etc. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I learned in my journey throughout the YCW and the YCS, was that the environment really affects every aspect of life. And that's been my journey in this. And it's also been there's been a lot of similar realities with the students that I've been working with. And so I work for YCS and YCW, and some of the schools that I work in are in Marsden Park, which is in Western Sydney. Actually, all of the schools are in Western Sydney. So it's Marsden Park in the lower Blue Mountains, and an urban developmental place called Gabbles. And so two of those places are affected by the urban heat effects right now, and it will be just getting worse when summer hits. And I think one of the things is that it will be 10 degrees higher than the eastern suburbs. And in our lower Blue Mountain students, they're always affected by floods and by our bushfires that happen, which is horrendous. And some of the things that we've been reviewing at in our YCS groups has been for our Blue Mountain students. They've picked up on that it's coming up to summer, and that they're really worried about whether or not if their schooling will be affected this year. And these are some of the things that they're worried about. So they have a lot of anxiety when it comes to climate justice. And there's this feeling of hope that they want to do something about it, but then there's also this sense of hopelessness for them. And I think it's important to share these sort of views that are coming from the students, because there's so much that they want to do, but they don't know where to start. And I think something that's really helped them in this journey, and also myself as a young person, has been the review of life. which is the See, Judge, and Act. And something that we always start before we start an action is that we see what the problem is. So we see in what aspects of climate justice that they want to focus on. And for our Blue Mountain students, they want to focus on the bushfires, and they want to also start just advocating for a better care of environment at their school. They were saying that they don't have any recycle bins, and they were really shocked because it's just something that should be like in every other school, and this is coming from them. And so we started listing out, what the actual issue is and what's actually happening in their realities, and how it makes them feel. So there was a lot of talk about anxiety, a lot of talk about how they just think that other people don't really care, and how there's also this sense of pressure on young people that they think, oh, the older generation just ruined the earth for us, so now it's up to us to fix up this mess that they've created. How is that fair to us? They do feel that pressure, but then they also understand the problem is big, and just sort of encouragement would really help. And I think that's what the Review of Life does. And then we move into the judge section of what should be happening. And they start realizing that they can start making small steps or changes, and it instills hope in them. And it's also instilled like a lot of hope in myself as well, going through this process with them, and just even reviewing my own life. And some of the actions that they want to come up with, and we will be going more further into this at the beginning, in term 4. The week has just started for them, so they're not so we're not back yet at schools, but I will be going back and doing the sessions with them again next week up until the end of the school year. But there's been so many good ideas from the students, and they've wanted to start an initiative where they want to raise money to get some recycle bins for the schools, and initiatives for students to actually use it. Whether that be, I think some of the things that they came up with was a words of encouragement when you do put things in the recycle bins, because they think that there isn't much encouragement that comes from the school. So just sort of words of affirmation. And they were also saying that they wanted to raise some money for the local RFS, and because there will be fire season happening soon, and they were already seeing the effects of it when we were doing when Western Sydney and around just Sydney, they were doing backburns. So the quality of air was something else that they wanted to pick up on, but they were like, this is too much already. So we're going to just focus on 2 issues. And one of the past action that a school has done is that they've linked climate justice to mental health and how that affects people. And they did an online panel. They got a few students, a few teachers, a few parents, and they got some members from the YCW and a mentor and an expert who was an expert in climate justice. And they were able to just sort of acknowledge what's going on right now in their realities, as well as come up with small actions that they can do to help the environment a little bit. And that fostered a lot of hope for a lot of the other students and in that school as well. So those are some of the actions that we've been doing and that we've been taking on as different schools. There has been a bit of discussion of wanting to do a collective action together with all 3 schools, but that's it's a bit difficult to arrange, but we're trying to arrange it right now of action that we can do together for climate justice. But yeah, that's yeah, that's it. That's the good works that's coming from YCS.
Thank you very much, Irene. Yeah, well, that's fantastic. Yes, so it's great to see, and it's encouraging for us, older generation, to see the younger generation picking up the challenge that we've left. And I think if people would like to have a look in the chat, you'll see that there's already a few questions for our panelists or for discussion among ourselves. And I think the first one is from Richard Walsh. How significant is meditation, contemplation, and encountering creation, as well as the creator healer? So I'm not sure if that's directed to Jacqui. It was an early question. It might have been directed to Jacqui or to Tony. Anyway, whoever, would you like to pick it up, Jacqui, for a start?
Thanks, Stefan. I'm happy to. Thanks so much for your question, Richard. I think it's different for each person, but so from my perspective, certainly as an educator as well, contemplating is a critical component of the journey of ecological conversion. And one of the pedagogies I work with that's got a couple more phases in it. See, Judge, Act with 3 is easy to work with, but I find the nuance of experiencing so that we have firsthand experience for that seeing to happen is critical, but then contemplating after that before we go to look at what our faith tradition and what science and what all the different interpretations from wisdom traditions can be. So that's the 3rd phase. And then the 4th phase, which I've been really fostering and working with a lot, has been the dialogue process, because that is the first action that we're called to in Laudate. It's a critical action, and it's an ongoing action that brings about the change. So if we don't contemplate from the perspective of creation and our creator God and what this means, then we can't participate in the dialogue in a way that's beyond our individualism. And I think that's one of the traps or the challenges of our society these days. Everything's challenged, and pointing for the individual to be satisfied, the individual's journey. And we've really got to contemplate being part of the ecosystem. It means we're part of an ecological community. And this contemplating process is easily the accessible way, whether we're contemplating when we walk, when we're sitting still, when we're praying, when we're inside church, when we're outside in the cathedral of creation. All of those ways of contemplating are critical. But the 5th phase I wanted to mention as well there in that process, after experiencing, contemplating, interpreting, and being in dialogue, is what we most need right now, which is co-creating. We really need to create the new pathways that are not dependent on fossil fuels. We really need to create the ways in which our economy functions, where the values of life and the gifts of creation are what we are caring for. So there's a whole range of things I could say after that, but that's probably enough in terms of my response for now. Thanks, Stefan.
Thank you. Yes, very much, Jacqui. I don't know if Tony, you got anything on that? You want to jump in on that question at all, or anybody else?
I find that my wife and I are very blessed. We have a property outside of Launceston, and that sits under one of the mountains here. And I find spending time on top of the mountain by myself and just looking out over creation to be an awesome experience. And so what I'm suggesting is it's not just a question of sharing that with others, but it's what do we do ourselves? Do we go out into the wilderness and spend time and look what's actually happening out there and enjoy the sunsets, but get off the mountain early? I must say, I've been caught a few times, but yeah, that's very important. Excuse me.
All right. Well, look, I'll move to the second question that I see there. Oh, sorry, were you finished, Tony? Yeah, I don't know if did you want to add anything else? Anyway, I'll move to the second question, which is I'm not sure who AB is. If you'd like to jump in, AB, feel free. The question is, where does political action come? Oh, it's Anne Benjamin. Sorry, I can see that now. Where does political action come in? Without pressure on politicians and business leaders, how will change happen? Yeah, so any of our panelists, if you'd like to jump in on that question, feel free to do so.
It's a brilliant question. I'm happy to jump in. I really think this is a critical dimension that we can no longer ignore. You know, when we make decisions every day, the decisions we make, they're political. We can't ignore the fact that our ethics and our morals, wherever they are, guide those choices. And at the moment, there's a dominant worldview that everything has a price, everything can be bought. This is that technocratic paradigm. And I think we've really got to be clear and take a stand and say that we can't buy, no matter what we do, we can't buy a new climate. We can't replace or produce a species that's extinct. We can't, generate the systems that have gone. So I think there's something really critical about how we call our leaders today that we've elected in to be accountable for the things that they've been elected in for, but to support them in that, because it's a big job. We've seen every single politician in Australia who's taken a stance on climate, they haven't lasted. It's been too diabolical for them. And the vested interests are so strong, as Pope Francis articulates in the exhortation, not just in our nation, but everywhere, that they are holding sway over our political leaders. So this is a diabolical situation, and it's an absolute killer. And that's how serious it is. I'm a very hopeful person. I live a life of joy and hope, don't get me wrong. But the exhortation is bringing into absolute clarity for us how dangerous and precarious our lives are on the planet, our children's lives are, and life as we know it in terms of the life-supporting systems of fresh water and beautiful food to eat that's fresh and healthy, and all the things that we've been able to be privileged to enjoy. So the political stance that we're called to take now is not just individual, it's collective. And we need to stand together to show our leaders what it is that we want our future to be. And we also need to get on with creating it and not wait for them to lead it and give us permission or, some silver pathway. It's not going to happen like that. It's what we do each day that creates the future. It's the systems we choose to participate in that we're supporting with our money, with our time, with our effort. So I think we get on and create it. That's a political decision. I think we support the leaders who have taken a stand, and we continue to support them, and we continue to call those who are not being strong enough to do so. And that includes at the COP28 meeting, because there's too much at stake for us not to weigh into this. And Pope Francis, the leader of the Catholic Church right now, is taking that stand. We've not seen that ever before. This is huge. And so we've got to do what we can to support that from where we are. And so that means the intensive learning we've got to do with our parishes, with our schools. I've just finished a 6-week parish pilgrimage for the Archdiocese of Canberra-Goulburn, where over the season of creation, there was participants from across the Archdiocese on that journey. And we learnt about all the dimensions of the Laudate Si goals, especially ecological economics, because this is one of the key things that needs to shift the story. That's why the technocratic paradigm is so powerful, and we really need to get onto that. So we don't have time to wait. We don't have the luxury of taking it slow. And I know processes that we are attending to are slow, and it's great. I love being an educator. I love doing the work I am with schools and education systems, with my kids, with students. It's wonderful. But there's a lot more that we need to bring to bear now in terms of the politics of the times. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's particularly relevant in Western Australia, where we are now. Some of you may have seen this week's Four Corners program, which clearly illustrated some of the challenges that we face here. Yeah, look, I don't know if anybody else would like to jump in on that issue. Anne, do you want to make any comments since it was your question?
Thanks, Stefan. Only to say, well, that was a great answer. Thank you, Jacqui. But in the trenches, in the parish trenches, I keep seeing a resistance. We need to grow and change so that people of faith don't see political engagement as opposed to faith. I mean, some political engagement can be, but on issues such as this, when we're talking about creation and our stewardship and our responsibility, there's a direct call to us to act with responsibility as adult citizens and participate, and as you say, help shape our world. But there is some resistance to that, I think. But thank you for a great answer. Yeah.
That's a pleasure. And I think you're right to remind us that the resistance is real, Anne, and we've got to expect it, but it doesn't mean that we fail to bring the love to this that we're called to as people of faith. So it's the way that we do it that really matters now. It's through that loving attention, it's through that care, it's through that openness to be in dialogue with people that don't speak the same way we do in terms of the politics of the times, but hold the faith, that having that dialogue, that asking the question, that listening and going further is actually worth the time that it's going to take. Because when people are heard, there's an openness that comes. So I think it's challenging, clearly, but we're the adults in this story now. We've got to do this work. Tony Robertson, were you going to say something?
Look, Stefan, I'm wondering whether in this forum we could also do some skills training for people in this political activism. One of the things we've learnt from the referendum campaign is the power of what people call the kitchen table conversations. I think put your hand up if you've been involved in a kitchen table conversation about the referendum. Look, the hands are up. Yes. The other reality is, and you're right, the resistance in the pews. The other reality is most of our community are not in the pews. And this is an issue that speaks to their heart, that they've never heard connected: faith, politics, the earth, all these things. I'm finding this all the time. But Stefan, I'm wondering whether we could dedicate one of these online forums to some practical skills base for everything from speaking to your politician to online activism to kitchen table programs. Is that a possibility in the next few months?
Well, that's a great
Just
idea,
your views,
Tony.
Stefan.
Yeah, well, that is a great idea, because just this afternoon with Pat, Branson and Gemma, we were discussing some ideas for future webinars, and one of them certainly was what could be the follow-up to this thing. So yeah, let's stick with that idea, and maybe we can have a chat afterwards about how we could implement that. But I see that we're getting close to the hour and a half. I know Jacqui's got another event coming up soon. I see, before we move to the conclusion, I know there was at least one question for Sherie here. I can see it from Gemma, I think. Sherie, great work. Do the year 10s go through actions that the primary students could be doing, or the actions they are doing themselves? Oh, I think there's some replies here. Do you want to pick that up, Sherie?
Sure. Yeah, I was just saying that they do both. So it's certainly about looking and reflecting and seeing what is specifically going on in their day-to-day, and what simple actions and simple lifestyle choices are the students making themselves, and then also on a primary school level, getting them to reflect on what they see in their classroom, at home, in their school, and then coming up with ideas from there.
Great. Thank you very much, Sherie. Do any of our panelists like to get some final comments before we close up? Irene, would you like to respond to any of the things that have been said?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the comments I wanted to make was that I think young people are really eager to make political action or take on political action. It's just they don't know where to start. I, for one, I actually just attended a action conference led by the Josephite sisters here in North Sydney, and Sister Janet was really talking about some of the political action that she's been running and about how she barges into politicians' office and just prays there with a bunch of other leaders from different religions, and they just pray there. And that was really crazy for me to hear, but I learned a lot of good skills, and a lot of young people actually came, and it was for a young people a youth action conference. So I think a lot of youths actually learned up great skills on how to talk to politicians. I mean, even I did, so did I, and I was able to talk to a few politicians that they had invited. And some of the responses that I got from them were, I guess it just kind of speaks truth about what our reality is right now. It's just politicians aren't grassrooted people. They try to be, but they sit in their offices and they expect people to come to them. And I think that is a reality that we all need to sort of swallow, because they're not going to be, there are some, but they're not going to be the ones who are coming out to us. We have to go to them with something set, an agenda set, things that we want and actions we want. And we need to barge into their offices and say, hey, I want you to listen to me. These are the terms and conditions that we've reached out to, and this is what we want. It just needs to be an organized collective movement, and I think politicians will actually listen, and they will be eager to listen if we have it set out for them and practically do their jobs for them. But yeah, just to start that sort of process off. And I think, yeah, if we could do a session about political action and about how we can talk to politicians, I think will be great for us here, and also for some young people that I know that will be interested.
Thanks very much, Irene. Tony, would you like to have any concluding remarks?
I don't want to drop the tenure, but within the schools here in Tasmania, there's been a directive basically organised by the Archbishop to say that none of the school children should go to political action. So we face that sort of issue within the church. But that doesn't mean that stops them, because they still do go, they just don't wear their uniforms.
Yeah, well, we all have our challenges, and that's another one to deal with for sure over in Tasmania. Yeah, look, I better hand over to Jacqui if you'd like to make any last comments, Jacqui, because I know you do have another event coming up. Do you have any kind of closing words you'd like to share with us? Thanks,
Stefan. And I want to say how inspiring it's been to listen to you, Irene. It's just so important to have the perspective of young people at an event like this. So I just want to really thank you for what you've shared. And Sherie, you're at the front line with young people, and I really think that the education process is so critical to what we create at this point for the future. So thank you for what you've shared and the awesome work you're doing as well. I want to sympathise with Tony. I was really involved with work in the Archdiocese of Hobart for many years, the chair of the Bishop's Commission for Justice, Ecology and Peace. The previous Archbishop was a total legend to work with. We were doing all sorts of wonderful things in the Styx Valley and connecting the big issues of the times. We brought out the Bishop's statement on climate change in 2005 together. There's just a totally diabolical paradox now. And I saw it happen because your current Archbishop was also the chair of Catholic Earth Care, sadly, for a couple of years when I was a director there for the 10 years, and it was the lowest time that I had there. So I empathise, and I appreciate that there isn't always going to be the leadership that we want around us. And in fact, I think we can see time and time again examples, whether it's inside the church or outside, that lets us down or that feels not good enough. But I think what that's doing is that's the Spirit showing us that more needs to be done, and that we can actually create the bridges and be the people we're called to be. And that to me is what the hope story is about. When we see each other rise up, when we see each other speak from the heart, to say the things that are most sitting with us that we want to see happen. And when we recognise that the earth has limits, the earth has very real biophysical limits, and we need to speak and design and think and create from that beginning point. And then we'll be able to do a lot more with the sense of goodness about what we're doing. So I encourage you to consider from the perspective of the ecosystem first, and then take an adventure that you haven't yet, because they're the creative pathways the Spirit's calling us to, and that Pope Francis is rallying us to do. This is our time. He won't always be our Pope. We've really got to work with this now, and it's for the sake of this whole life that we understand and are only just glimpsing what God's incredible divine plan is for life on earth. Thanks so much. It's been wonderful to be with you.
Well, thank you very much, Jacqui. Yeah, and that's a wonderful challenge you've left us with. And thanks to all our panelists, Tony, Irene and Sherie. We've got a lot to go on with, and Tony's also, the other Tony, our second Tony, has given us some practical ways of going forward on that. So I'd just like to thank everybody for being with us tonight, and you can be sure, one way or the other, we're going to try and follow up on this session tonight. Thank you all very much.